Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening to discuss scholarships and majors, how clarity can unlock more college aid. You're here for the majors, you're here for the scholarships, you're here with questions about college admissions and fit and your life path. These are weighty issues we're going to tackle. Fortunately, we have some real experts on on both of these topics. I'd first like to start by introducing Lisa Marker-Robbins. Lisa, can you let everybody know a bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So my heartbeat truly is, and it's so geeky, helping people 15 to 25 figure out their path and their purpose. So I am a career coach for that age group. They are my favorite age group, and I've worked with all ages, but it's my favorite age group to figure out what comes after graduation. And it's something that I'm supporting not just the student for an outcome, but their parents too. I've launched three of my own kids into adulthood. It's scary. There's a lot of emotions with that. We're all three of us are that age group, right? And so we're here to support everybody in it. And yeah, that's who I am. Flourish Coaching, and my way that we do it is Launch Career Clarity, which is our online course with live support.
Wonderful. Dave Peterson, the scholarship coach. Can you tell everyone about your background?
Absolutely. Well, I got into the world of scholarships out of necessity. We had not saved anywhere near enough money to get my son through college. Fortunately, I realized that early enough that I realized we needed to figure out an alternate funding source. And so I learned everything I could about the world of scholarships. He started applying as a high school junior. He won three scholarships that year. Senior year, we went all in as a family. I'm finding the scholarships for him. He's applying. I'm reviewing his essays and applications. Long story short, at high school graduation, he had earned 18 outside scholarships, and maybe we'll clarify what an outside scholarship is compared to institutional aid. And then by the time he graduated college, he had earned 23 outside scholarships, which covered two-thirds of his college expenses, tuition, room, board, books, fees, the whole nine yards. The other one-third was covered by institutional aid, and we spent 1,500 bucks all in for his degree. So because of that, a lot of friends and family started asking for help with scholarships, and that's where my business, Scholarship GPS, was born. And I work with families in a number of different ways, but my primary program is the Scholarship GPS course. It's our flagship program that shares everything I know about scholarships for anybody who's in that program.
Fantastic. And I'm Mike Bergin, your moderator for this evening. And my reason for being here is that after more than 30 years at the intersection of education and admissions, anytime people are having really productive and informative conversations about anything having to do with the path to college or success in life, I want to be part of that conversation. We do a lot of this at the Test and the Rest podcast, of which I am a co-host. Unfortunately, my co-host Amy Seeley could not join me to manage the moderation tonight, so Dave and Lisa are going to have to go easy on me. I am the founder of Chariot Learning, a company based in upstate New York that provides expert individualized SAT and ACT prep to the world. I am the writer of the Roots to Words Free Word of the Day newsletter and the tutor of the newsletter. I'm the president emeritus of the National Test Prep Association. There's a lot to talk about. Um, what we're going to cover, and just to be clear, we're talking about scholarships, we're talking about college majors. We have a lot of both points that we've come up with together and also some submitted questions. And thank you for
Mhm.
that. While we're speaking, if people want to share questions in the chat, please do, and I'll be sure to pick them up. Another really valuable reason to stay to the end is because we're going to be talking about some of the most popular and meaningful majors and specific scholarships associated with each one. And there will be, if we're fortunate, time for more questions at the end. So,
Yes.
uh, so please put questions that you have in the chat as they come to you. Don't worry, we won't call anyone out by name, and the camera will not be focused on you. But I want to dive right in because there's so much to discuss. And Dave, I'm going to start with you. Um, You have spoken about scholarships and you just alluded to the private or the outside scholarships.
Mhm.
You say that they're not awards for past achievements.
Yep.
What is the perspective through which families and applicants should be approaching scholarships with then?
So you have to think about, why is this organization offering a scholarship, and particularly when we're talking about outside scholarships, but I think it even applies to institutional aid, is that they are looking to be a part of that student's future. Um, if your scholarship application is just simply a resume or a brag sheet in essay form, that's really not what scholarships are looking for. They want to know, what's this person going to do beyond tomorrow, beyond today and tomorrow, and how are we as the scholarship provider helping that student launch into that future thing, whether that's their future college major, their future career. How are they going to make the world a better place through whatever it is they're going to be doing in the future? Particularly for outside scholarships, these are marketing tools. As nice as Coca-Cola probably is as a corporation, they are not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. And if you go on the Coca-Cola Scholars website, they are still talking about past scholars from last year, 5 years, 10 years ago, because they want to get the message out. We, Coca-Cola, help this student achieve this great thing. So when I'm saying scholarships are not an award for past achievement, that's really what I'm saying.
You're also saying that kind of it's not just meant to be meaningful for the applicants, but th- the organizations or individuals that award them, there's something in it for them too.
Yes, absolutely. And that thing is PR. It's goodwill and getting the brand out there in a positive way.
Thank you. Speaking of misconceptions, Lisa, many parents and applicants assume that the decision to figure out a major or a path comes after you begin college. Now, while that may be true, that has major implications for the ability to even get into the school of your choice and uh, some other issues. So, can you talk a bit about how career clarity can help prevent mishaps in that area?
Sure. So we do assume, that it's figure outable later, and of course it is, but doors are already closing and options are off the table when we wait till after high school graduation for college-bound students. The reality is that 73% of all students who attend college go to a research university. They do not go to a liberal arts college. At research universities, the role of the major that you list on your application is going to play a role on if you get in. Now, we did a study of the state flagships and we found that at 8% of schools of this 50 state flagships, the role of major did not truly play any role. So that's only 4 schools, my friends, out of 50, where it didn't play any role on getting in and getting aid and all of the things. For the rest of them, the schools either admitted directly to the major, so you absolutely had to, as Dave said, talk about where you're headed. What have you done in your past? Andy Borst, who at the time was at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, now he's at the University of Georgia. I was just with him last week at NACAC. He said, in 150 words, my friend, so you got to be concise. You got to tell us what you've done in your past to inform, in another 150 words, what you're going to do in your future. That's what they want to know. And so Rick Clark from Georgia Tech, he was on my podcast back in April, and they don't even admit to major, but he talked about the role that FTM, fit to major, plays on getting in, and it plays a significant role. They want to know how even those schools that don't admit to major, they say on the Common App, what's your intended major after you get here? Not, some schools, what a major are you applying to? But otherwise, what's your intended major? And they're going to evaluate the applicant on what you've done to inform that decision. And that's called fit to major. So there are some majors, such as at Georgia Tech, computer science, nursing at many schools. The majors actually that Dave and I are going to talk about with scholarships tied directly to them later in this talk, that they're off the table if you're already on campus because they are capacity capped or they don't even allow students to switch into them later. So it makes a huge difference. Oh, you're muted,
You're
Mike.
muted, Mike.
That's just being polite. All right, that's terrific. Now, Dave, if a student does develop a direction,
Mhm.
are there implications for scholarship applications with that?
Sure, absolutely. So there's really kind of two obvious ones. One would be if you know your future path, there are major specific scholarships, both outside scholarships as well as institutional scholarships. So scholarships from that particular department. So that's the first. The second would be even for some of these senior year scholarships that are open to any or students going into any major, having that defined what I call personal narrative. So that's the story of where they're going, backed up, like Lisa said, by past experiences that demonstrate that actual interest and ability to get to that future goal. Even those general scholarships still want a student's personal narrative. They want to know the student is has a plan that they're going to achieve something. And so, the students that I've worked with, even when they're applying to quote general scholarships that are open to any major, they are still having success by having that personal narrative that relates to their future college major.
All right. Having a direction definitely has some impact on crafting your applications. Lisa, how should students get started if they have no idea about majors or what they might be interested in? What are some steps that they can take?
Well, really, we begin with the end in mind. That's what I always say. Stephen Covey has preached that for years in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And we begin with the end in mind and we reverse engineer it. The mistake that I see families making is we ask the student, first of all, where do you want to go to school? And that it's often based on geography. You ask, I live in Cincinnati. Mike is in upstate New York. You ask somebody in New York in January where they want to go to school, they're suddenly saying Florida. You ask in July when it's lovely up there, Mike. I drove through in July when you were not
Hmm.
there, and they might want to stay there. So it's geography and football and all of the things that are informing that decision. And then they go, okay, I got in. Now, what do I want to major in? And then typically, okay, now what am I going to do with that major? Like I said, you can still obviously figure it out, but some options are going to be off the table at that point. So when you begin with the end in mind, you begin with career exploration, not college major exploration. What you study in college does not dictate what you're going to do for the rest of your life, right? So let's start with understanding careers, but you have to first also be sure you're understanding yourself at a deep level. We build self awareness, and then we tie that self-awareness into what careers fit, and then what major or majors, there might be a bunch of them, can get you a spot working in that. And then, okay, what schools are good for that major? There's over 3,000 schools. There's a school that's going to fit for your kid, that they're going to like the campus and the vibe and all the things.
All right. Let's go back to a point. Dave, we were discussing that the scholarship providers, they have their own perspectives and purpose.
Mhm.
How can applicants keep that in mind for their own benefit?
Well, go back and do a bit of research about this organization. So, one of my favorite scholarships that I recommend for every high school student is the VFW, Veterans of Foreign War. It's called the Voice of Democracy Scholarship, open to students grades 9 through 12. There's no minimum GPA
My
requirement.
daughter got that one.
Yeah, yeah, yep. And just learning a little bit about what is the VFW, what is their mission. Their mission is not to provide scholarships. That's secondary. Their mission is to help veterans. So, regardless of what that year's essay prompt is, can you talk nicely about veterans as part of your essay? Now, this is not relating to college major, but um, I'm just using that as an example. So I'm not saying that you need to say, I love Coca-Cola when you're applying for the Coca-Cola scholarship. But if you're talking, well, Coca-Cola might be a bad example because you don't actually submit an essay for the first round. But we'll pretend that you do. Let's say you're submitting an essay. You could potentially talk about something like business, because Coca-Cola is obviously a major corporation. So really just understanding, what does this organization do? What are their mission? What are their values? And then how do I align with what I want to do in the future with that? Obviously, authenticity is going to be important. Just, if you don't like veterans, then please don't apply for the VFW scholarship. And God help you, that would be terrible. But it's a pretty obvious and blunt example to make a larger point, hopefully.
You used a powerful word there, authenticity.
Hmm.
And I think authenticity should inform every aspect of the admissions process, where part of this whole crucible is figuring out who you are better, figuring out where you're going. Lisa, that sense of authenticity, who a student is, what their personal wiring or values are, how can how can somebody kind of operationalize this process and figure out how to tap into that for figuring out their path and then manifest that in some of their essays?
Sure. So let me say a word about authenticity real quick. And, Rick Clark did make the point on my podcast about, and he's the Georgia Tech one. He's like, please do not apply to social work because you think it's going to get you in here. And then we look at your application and your essays, and it screams, aerospace engineering, right? Or chemical engineering. And he's at a tech school. But they will see right through if you have an authentic application, and that includes essays, right? So, first of all, it's just like we say, they can tell if your parents wrote your essays, right? They can also tell if there's a lack of alignment. So, when we build self awareness, we look at, first of all, what motivates me to work. So, we assess personality through the lens of the Berkman assessment, and all of our students take it. But there are a lot of assessments out there. I think one of the mistakes, if we want to go back to myths and mistakes and do some busting there, a lot of times we want the easy path and we want to be able to take an assessment and fill in the dots or click the box and for it to give us the magical answer. And it doesn't work that way. Everything that is valuable takes effort, it takes time. It's not quick, it's not easy. And so the process is, while I believe that personality assessments can be informative, they are not the answer, it's the process, right? So when it comes to the self awareness piece, first of all, teens do have the ability to gain self awareness. Even though they seem, when they're with their parents sometimes, and I remember my kids, they're all up in their head and in your face or walking away from your face, turning their back on you. They do have the ability to tap in and do this when they're given a framework to do it, right? So, what motivates me to work? What are my strengths? What do I need and expect from other people in my work environment? What are my values? And finally, what are my aptitudes? And that's where we have to get really, really honest with ourselves on aptitudes, because that is about what am I good at academically, right? Everybody wants to rave about STEM and all the opportunities and the money and all the things. But the reality is, those are the majors that people change out of the most. And it's often because students are successful in math, in physics, in high school. It's a whole nother level when they get there. So, those are the 5 things we tap into when we're looking at what are my superpowers so I can figure out what's going to fit.
So very interesting. We recently released on the Test and the Rest podcast a conversation about ikigai and how that impacts college, the college application process. And ikigai, for people who are not familiar with this Japanese concept, is kind of the overlapping circles for what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. And if you can find your place in the overlapping Venn diagram, there may be something there, but, and this is kind of a follow-up to you, Lisa, picking up on a question that was submitted to us before we started. What if the thing that somebody really loves is not something that they want to monetize necessarily? They want to talk about going into business for this or studying, but it's still an essential part of who they are. Is there a way to get that into the application where they're maintaining their focus
Yeah.
on their path in life, but there's more to them than just that?
Yeah, I remember looking at this question, what was submitted, and there's a part of this question that taps into like find your passion, right?
Right.
And I think that's horrendous advice for us to give anybody because, first of all, um, I know that that puts an undue pressure on our teens that as if, oh, there's one thing that I should be so passionate about that it's all I want to do. And I got to work it into my work life. Not true, my friends. Okay. So undue pressure. Let's remove the pressure. I've also seen over time that passion grows with proficiency and passions shift over time, right? So let's believe that about passion. Okay. Now, this question also gets into like, we want kids to be able to do the things that they love, right? And not just chase trying to check boxes to get in someplace. And that piece is essential. It makes me think of a student that I was working with before who he was never going to go to state in swimming. He was in our course and he said, "Do I need to quit my swim team to be able to do these things?" And I said, "No." But we did an extracurricular inventory. This is a fantastic time of year to do this, by the way, if you have a high schooler. And we thought, what lights you up that we would not let go of? For this kid, it was recreational swimming. It was his community. It was fun. But he had some lower level things that he wasn't putting a lot of time into, but the cumulative effect of that was big. And they were things that he was just checking boxes on some of them. Some of them he liked a little bit. And then we shed some of those off. And then we added some things to work on the clarity piece, right? So, how do we work that in? There's great essays, as Dave knows, we talk about essays a lot. There's great essays that you have to answer across the board, and you can weave in both the personal side and the professional side. But I think both have to be there to be truly authentically yourself, right? Sometimes it's what's your favorite extracurricular? Like that's one that you work in. It might that particular essay may not have anything to do with your career path, but you're going to have an opportunity to talk about your career path elsewhere. And that would be a piece of advice. Like on college applications, don't make your personal statement and then the extracurricular essay, then the community essay. Don't make them all about why this major. That's another mistake I think
Yeah, you
people
definitely want to make sure that you're using each statement,
differently.
each supplement to cover different
Yes.
aspect of your multifaceted fascinatingness. Is that a word, fascinatingness?
Can you
I
say
should know
that
this.
again? Can you say that 5 times fast?
Dave, does that aspect of the way a student spends their personal time inform their scholarship applications as well? We're not just talking about their majors and goals, but also their interests.
Yeah, it definitely can. First, the first thing you always have to respond to the prompt if we're talking essays, or sometimes scholarships are now asking for a student to make a video instead of an essay. So everything always is subservient to that. What is the prompt, and are you answering the question or questions being asked? But as Lisa was talking, I was thinking about that question because I saw it come in before we started, and there are even scholarships for students who might have this side passion that's not going to lead to their career. Thinking of one, if you love movies, there's one called Dr. Chu's Movie Reviews. Now, I don't imagine there are too many people listening to this who have a student who plan to become the next Siskel and Ebert, but they might like movies, right? So this could be something they really enjoy, and it's a still a scholarship opportunity to tap into something they love. So yeah, all these kind of extracurriculars that maybe not leading to a career, there is still opportunity. And we talked about some of these other scholarships that require multiple essays, like Lisa was talking about, kind of on the admission side. Very similar. You don't have to, if scholarship has 3 or 4 essays. Not every essay has to say the same thing in a different way. You can talk about different things, and if one of the questions is, what's your favorite extra or hobby or extracurricular, fantastic.
Because time is running short, I want to, believe it or not, time is running short. We still have a half hour, but there's so much more to talk about. I want to ask, and I'll start with you, Lisa. What is the biggest piece of advice that you would give to a family overwhelmed by the pressure to get everything right for this multifaceted, and I'm using that word again because there just seems to be almost a kaleidoscope of fragments of things that you've got to get. You've got to get the financial piece right. You've got to get the interest right. You've got to get the academic piece right, the extracurricular piece right. There's so much to deal with. It can be stressful, feels chaotic. Is there some clarity that you can shine on this process?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm starting early, not freshman year, by the way. So if you have a freshman, well, Dave, actually, for scholarships, you would maybe start a little bit freshman year, and we've had
Yeah.
that discussion on my podcast. But for test prep, Mike, you're the expert on that.
I'll weigh
Uh,
in. Don't worry.
yeah, I know you will. For test prep, for college major, career development, that type of work, you should always be studying hard. But the other stuff that Mike, what you work on and what I do, 10th grade. When you start in 10th grade, you're not feeling this the clock ticking, 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 ticking. I gotta go, 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 go. You will have more ease and flow and less stress by starting early. You also have time to take an ACT and not do great and regroup, right? Do a real world experience through a career that you are considering and find out, oh, it doesn't fit. I think of my student Nate, who years ago, he now works on Wall Street, but years ago as a sophomore, he had an IT internship and he thought he wanted to go into computers. And he did it for the summer paid internship. Internships do exist, my friends, for high schoolers. And he was like, I hated it. But they did a project with the finance department. He's like, ooh, I might be interested in that. So then we had time to like vet that. And he found a fit there, right? So start early. Trust that your kid has the ability to dig in and do this work and make informed decisions. But I would also say when it comes to the work I do, you're making a first decision of the first step into work. You're not making a forever decision. There will be through lines. I always say career coaching, career advising often takes place at a place and time, right? So if I've got somebody in my course that's taking place for a place and time, career development should be lifelong. You should be growing and developing. Like if I did not have an attitude of career development, we would not be on Zoom right now, my friends, because I would have never learned how to do it or learned how to do a course. So lifelong learning would be a big piece of advice I would give.
Fantastic. Dave, how about you?
Well, what I was thinking of when Lisa, you were talking about starting early and the kind of freedom and the ability to go through it at a methodical pace and not feel rushed and stressed. Intentionality is the word that kept coming to mind for me, and I think that applies to every aspect of college prep. And if your student is doing well in school, but then they just come home and they're scrolling, whatever kids scroll these days, TikTok or whatever, or playing video games all day, they're not having these experiences that are going to allow them to figure out what their future is going to be, unless by chance maybe they're going to be a game developer. Who knows if that's even going to be a career in 5 years with AI? Maybe Lisa, you can talk to that. But getting out of their bedroom, getting off their phones, and experiencing the real world, doing real things, they're first of all going to be far more interesting people. I think they're going to be happier, and it will allow them to figure out what they enjoy and what they're good at and passionate about. And along the way, you can apply for some scholarships, applying early. I mentioned my son started as a junior. I tell people our biggest regret is we didn't start earlier. So just that being intentional about things. And Mike, you had a great post on Facebook today or yesterday about essentially that putting in the work. The results are about putting in the work, right?
It's true. I look at all of this from the very foundation, right? We're talking about seeking out higher education and funding that pursuit. Well, you have to be education minded in that we work with lots of students that come very late to the idea that their time in school should be a time of learning, not just getting
Yeah.
grades,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
like they're two very different uh, positions there. And I would urge students to take the classes that interest them the most, but whatever classes they're taking, show their interest by achieving excellence. I will strongly recommend that students, as early as possible, you can't start too early in building a reading habit, reading 15
Mhm.
minutes a day, everything about test prep, that much of what is difficult at the end of the process is very easy if you started early with a natural reading habit, building a vocabulary, understanding what effective written communication looks like and sounds like, and you learn how to read and understand what an author is writing to tell you.
These are
Uh,
crazy ideas, Mike.
yeah, I know they're radical, right? Engage with your math. Here's another thing. Don't just decide that you are math science only or reading writing only. Embrace it all, especially because you want to be able to pivot, as Lisa has suggested, right? The choices that you make in high school or during the college application process are not lifelong commitments. You can change your mind and you want to be ready for that. So, you can start early and just keep in mind that authenticity has to manifest academically as well, right? You cannot write down that you're dying to study science when you skipped all the honors and AP opportunities at your disposal, right? You came to it late. There's a story there, but it's a much easier story to tell if you really follow your interests early.
Mike, when you were sharing that, what came to mind is really about mindset, right? So it makes me think of a kid, Brady, who was in our course. He always told himself he was bad at math because something that his junior high math teacher told him. And when we got his interest inventory, his numerical score was high. And he was like, "What? I'm bad at math." And so we had these conversations. Do you know that Brady changed his mindset because of an interest inventory? He
Right.
ended up really like tapping in. The next year, he upped it to honors math and actually decided to slow down a little bit on English. And now he's headed in a totally different direction because he changed his mindset.
Yeah. It's great. And right. And I mean, I don't have words that I can share in this context for teachers that limit students' dreams, ambitions, or ability. But just like students find that out by trying, everything that you both shared about getting out into the real world and trying it is critical to making these decisions and finding a path. I know that we could talk about this piece all day, but I want to move to another, which is to discuss kind of one of the central aspects of this webinar is to talk about some very important and popular majors and some specific scholarships associated with each. And Lisa and Dave collaborated to put together a really beautiful list. And Lisa, I'm going to ask you to start by just talking about the majors that you're focusing on.
Yeah, and I want to say everybody that's on, we're going to drop after we finish talking about this a PDF in the chat, and we'll also email it to you tomorrow. But it lists these scholarships that Dave unearthed that's related to the six most popular majors that I want to talk about today. So we're gonna give that to you guys so that you actually physically have it, right? But the six, I'll just quickly run down what the six are, but then explain how this works, right? So, computer science, nobody's surprised by that, I am sure. Business, psychology, this one might surprise you. Music performance, engineering, and nursing. Okay, so those are your six. Now, why those six? Some of them, like computer science and business, they're just super popular. They're among the most popular majors in the United States. And there's so many kids that want to get into that major that a college, a university could enroll multiple freshman classes every single year with kids in that major. From a running your university standpoint, you can't do that operationally. Kids need to be able to get in, get the classes they need to get out in time. And we're sitting here talking about scholarships. Scholarships last for 4 years if they're renewable scholarships, right, Dave?
Mhm.
And
Correct.
so this on time graduation idea is very, very important. And there are some majors, and this one's not on the list, but like teaching, if you don't start out as an education major, the odds that you're going to get out of school in 4 years are very slim. It's very, very difficult to do. And if you're adding summer school, you're going to have to pay for that summer school, right? So you've got things like computer science, business psychology, popular, popular, popular. Then you go to music, and it's interesting. In some schools, it's going to vary a little bit. Like I was talking to the University of Arkansas last week at the NACAC College Fair, and for them, it's architecture. Well, why? Because there's studio space associated with these creative majors. You might at Arkansas, they've got like every architecture major has their own beautiful studio. If you are a musical performance major, you've got to have studio time to go in and practice. They only have so many rooms that they can have on campus. So that's why you see things like music performance, and sometimes impacted majors also could be related to lab space, right? Engineering, again, super, super popular. A lot of people think they want to be an engineer because they're good at math and physics and they know that they can earn a good living. But I can tell you from a personality DNA, that is not what makes a happy engineer. There are lots of people that are very good at those two subjects that are miserable being engineers. And I'm sure every adult on here can name some, right? So it's about that's why we really need to not only research from behind a computer, sitting here researching, but we need to go out and get real world experiences to validate. We're teaching students, I work with teaching students how to validate through real world experiences. Then that helps create the narrative. This is why Dave and I love working together so much. Those experiences help them craft their personal narrative that supports the applications for the scholarships and the colleges. And finally, nursing. Nursing has labs involved. Nursing also has field experiences for which, and this is a problem sometimes even with education, for which you need to have somebody at the university who's in charge of making sure that you're doing okay in your labs or in your field experiences. So when there's field experiences and oversight like that with like teaching and nursing, that can be a problem. When I went to the NACAC fair last week, every college that I talked to, I said, do you have any majors that are capped? And they all would name some. Universally, every single college I talked to said nursing. Not a single one didn't say nursing. And then they all had other things to add. Well, for our school, computer science, for our school, architecture, for our school, whatever. But nursing, it's a tough nut to crack.
It is one of the hottest majors out there right
I,
now.
yeah. And we desperately need nurses. That's right. Like there's the friction, right? We desperately need great nurses. And yet these are it's a capacity cap major at every school. And at many schools, engineering, computer science, and nursing, if you don't apply as a 12th grader, the door is firmly shut. There's no way to switch into that major later. So, Dave, take it
And
away on these scholarships because I gave him the majors and he knows the why behind it, but he's the one that unearthed these great scholarship opportunities that we're going to give you.
Yeah, so we'll start with computer science. We have a big one. It's called the Regeneron Science Talent Search Scholarship. This one is for high school seniors. It closes November 6th, and the prize pool is $250,000. So huge, huge opportunity for computer science majors. When Lisa gave me these majors, she said, just find, give us one, but I like to over deliver. So I'm going to give you two for each one. A second one for computer science majors is called the Zip It Future of Connectivity. It's a smaller scholarship, $2,500, and it's only open to college students. So I don't know what the breakdown is of the viewers tonight, whether they're mostly parents of high schoolers, but for those of you who have students in college, that's a great one. If you're studying computer science.
Dave, before you move on, I think
Yeah.
it's good because you just mentioned that the Zip It was for college students, and
Mhm.
the Regeneron is for high school students, specifically
Yes.
high school seniors.
Yep.
It's probably worth pointing out what the deadline for that is in case anybody is hearing this and there's still time to get to work.
Yeah, yep. So the Regeneron is November 6th, and then Zip It is November 25th. And Mike, also a good point that you made that scholarships are not just for high school seniors. We've kind of alluded to the fact that they are open younger than that, believe it or not, elementary school, middle school, but you can continue applying for scholarships in college. Um, Most students don't apply for scholarships, and of those who do, most are only doing it during senior year, and then they get off to college, and it's something that just goes by the wayside. So highly recommend students continue to apply for scholarships in college. Um, just
It's such a
personally,
valuable piece of information. You have personal experience with that.
yeah. I mean, we would have had a much larger bill at the end had my son not continued to apply for scholarships in college. So yeah, it was personal for me. Okay, business. The John Galt Solutions Scholarship for Future Supply Chain Leaders. So that is a very specific niche within business supply chain. This is a $10,000 scholarship. This is again open to college students, and it closes November 30th. For students still in high school, particularly seniors, there's the U.S. Bank Student Scholarship, which has a $20,000 top prize. And that one closes at the end of October, actually October 30th, so a day before the end of the month. Now, that one, you don't have to be a future business major, but it ties in nicely. So, some of these scholarships may be open to students of any major, but again, we're talking about what is the mission of this organization? Well, this is a bank, that's a type of business. So, that's why I included it here. Psychology, the Junior Science and Humanities Symposium is a $2,500 scholarship for high school students. So I believe that's all high school students. I would have made a note, I think, to myself if it wasn't. That one's open all the way until December 4th, so lots of time to work on that. And then the Psi-Chi Undergraduate Scholarship is a $3,000 scholarship for undergraduate Psi-Chi members, and that is the College Psychology Honor Society. So that would, I believe you probably would have to be a psych major to actually join that honor society. And that's not doesn't close until this summer, so that
Hey,
you have a lot
Dave.
of time. Yeah.
I was going to say something like, even if somebody's on here and they have a 10th grader, I would guess that even these college scholarships, they're available year after year after year. So save the resource,
Yes.
do a calendar reminder, and then, whether that's 1 year, 2 year, 3 years from now, apply for the scholarship then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is again starting early and being intentional. Sure, I'm listing some scholarships that don't apply to your freshman today, but like you said, these scholarships they come around every year. Some scholarships are as often as every month. So when you find a scholarship that you're not eligible for today, but it seems likely you'll be eligible for tomorrow, put it on your list. Absolutely. Great point, Lisa. Music performance. All right. There's a really cool one called the Glenn Miller Birthplace Society Scholarship. This one's for high school seniors and college freshmen, so kind of a odd narrow window. It's not open right now, but I included it because I've interviewed the sponsor on my podcast a few
Mm.
times. And what's cool about it is that there's not only this scholarship prize, but the student gets to go to the Glenn Miller birthplace, which he was a famous big band musician back in pre-World War II, World War II era. You go to his birthplace and you actually get to perform there at a concert that they hold. So that would be a lot of fun for a kid who's going into music performance. And then the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution. Now this is one that almost everybody should listen up for because it's not just music majors. This is a scholarship that it's actually a pool of scholarships that has, I think, close to 100 unique scholarships within it. Everybody applies through the same application. They have one specifically for future music majors. But my son actually won a scholarship through the DAR because they have one for students going into history. That was his major. So this one will be opening November 1st. Students, like I said, you apply for multiple scholarships through a single application. Pro tip, if you find those types of scholarships, absolutely do those because it's, like 2 for 1, or in this case, 100 for 1, even though you won't qualify for all of them. All right, in the interest of time, let me go a little more quickly. Engineering, the Amazon Future Engineers Scholarships, a $40,000 scholarship. You do have to have taken computer science or engineering classes in high school or a dual enrollment program or currently be enrolled in that type of program. That will be opening this fall. If I remember right, it usually opens late October, early November. But like Lisa said, this one, it's been around forever. And then a smaller one, and another pro tip, small scholarships get far fewer
Mhm.
entries than the big ones. So the Scholarships 360 tuition solution for STEM students, that's open. I believe it's open right now, closes November 8th. It's $1,000, but again, personal experience. My son only won one large scholarship. Everything else was building off these smaller $1,000, $2,500 scholarships. Nursing, the Red Cross Leaders Save Lives Scholarship. Now, you don't have to be going into healthcare to participate in this one, but we talked about things like Fit to Major. This is a great example of that. So, what the student does is they actually organize a blood drive at their school in one of two windows, either during the winter break window or summer break coming back into school window. Perfect for students going into nursing or really any other healthcare care field, because not only could you earn the scholarship, but even if you don't, this is something to talk about in your scholarship essays and your forms, because it demonstrates this interest in healthcare, right? Now, somebody asked a question earlier about scholarships not related to their major. This is a great one for them too, because this shows entrepreneurship, right? You're organizing a blood drive. It shows that you care about the community. So, yes, you want to focus your scholarship search, but you can also kind of think outside the box a little bit. Last one for nursing, Hope for Tomorrow Medical Scholarship. This is a $5,000 scholarship for current college students from sophomore to senior year of college. So college freshmen are not eligible, and that one closes November 8th. So lots of actionable scholarships that people can start applying for right now. And obviously that's just a very short list of what's out there.
That's a short list. Off the top of your head, some of our attendees are wondering if you know any scholarships for accounting or history majors.
Oh, there definitely are for accounting. I can't think of any off the top of my head. History, absolutely, because that was my son's jam. Well, I mentioned the VFW, not exactly history related, but civics probably would apply. The DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, one of those roughly 100 scholarships in that pool is specifically for future history majors. So that's definitely one. Those are the two that come off the top of my head.
Fantastic. Another question that came up was wondering, and this is open to either of you. It's a financial aid question, so it may be outside of the scope of the expertise that you're willing to share. If you're just pursuing merit-based financial aid and scholarships, should you still file the FAFSA?
I
I'll
say
jump in
yes.
real quickly. I have a blog post coming out about this tomorrow. I teed it up for October 1st when FAFSA was supposed to open, which miracle upon miracles, it opened a few days early this year. Yes, everybody should fill out the FAFSA, even if you are 100% sure that you are not going to get need-based aid. The blog article goes into more reasons, but the biggest reason is that some colleges require the FAFSA to be filled out to even consider a student for merit scholarships. So you don't want to close that door. Now, there are some other good reasons, like you might need a student loan, and federal student loans are the cheapest loans you can get. They're not the only loans, but you need to fill out the FAFSA to have that door open as well. So,
You
yeah.
know, I was going to add to that. What Dave said is right. Some schools will require the FAFSA for you to get merit-based aid. There's a Big Ten school, and I don't know if this is still accurate, so we're not going to say the name of the school. But for the institutional scholarships, you did not have to have completed the FAFSA. But if you wanted the college specific, and in this case, I was working with a student who was majoring in engineering, and the school's, I almost just said its name, it's really, really good at engineering. And you had to have the FAFSA or you did not. You weren't qualified for the college major specific scholarships.
Fantastic. Any biology or pre-med scholarships coming to mind, Dave?
Ooh, off the top of my head, no, that Red Cross Leaders Save Lives would be a great one for either of those, particularly anybody going into healthcare. Sorry, I always have so many scholarships swimming in my head. It's sometimes hard to pull
Yeah.
them out. But yeah, I mean, both of those majors, there are a lot of scholarships.
I will say when my 27-year-old was in college, he was on a full tuition scholarship at the institutional level. And then the engineering school was writing him a check for $2,500. He thought that was his to keep. I said, no, I'm still paying for room and board, hand it over. But again, this is the role that like having that made the career and the major clarity made a difference for us.
So now I'm going to ask attendees, uh, coming up with very major specific scholarships is not something that even the scholarship coach can do on the fly. Um, there's a link to nodebtcollege.substack.com, and that's Dave's daily scholarship newsletter, and it's free. And I highly recommend that people follow it because he shares not just this small number of scholarships, but every day he's sharing valuable scholarships. And he is a resource that you can definitely speak to outside of this context for specific scholarship questions. I want to ask if you have other questions, definitely throw them in the chat. I want to bring up some other questions that we received, and one of them has to do with homeschoolers. Is there anything that you would add to the excellent advice that you both shared if a student is a homeschooler?
So I would add a couple things. First of all, in some ways, homeschoolers are at a real advantage with scholarships because they can incorporate some of these scholarships into their curriculum. So, for instance, let's say there's one called Stossel in the Classroom that's very economics and uh, current events focused. So, whatever their essay prompts are for that year, you can incorporate that into your kids' civics and economics lessons or their curriculum, and make that essay, maybe their course final or something like that. So that's a great advantage that homeschoolers have. Almost every scholarship is open to homeschoolers. It's basically zero the number of scholarships I've seen that say no, homeschoolers can't apply. Um, the one disadvantage, at least in my experience that I've seen, and I actually work with a disproportionate number of homeschoolers, is that a lot of homeschoolers have very similar resumes. So I would encourage homeschoolers to maybe think outside the box. Um, you know, I'm a church going person, so this is not an anti-church comment, but every homeschooler I work with who is a church going family, their extracurriculars are very church focused, which is fantastic in one respect. But one of the keys with scholarships is you need to differentiate yourself. So maybe think about some things the student could do besides just what they're doing at church. And again,
I
this is, yeah, yeah,
Well, I was gonna say, you know what what we were talking about earlier, like if you're passionate about being involved in your church, your faith community, right? Still do that, but not at the
yes,
expense of everything else. And that's kind of, Mike, you had teed up a question earlier, right? It's along the same thing. It's about balance, right? And I would say, from my perspective for homeschoolers, I was thinking advantage and disadvantage, right? So, one of the disadvantages is like my Launch Career Clarity course, not only are families in it, but we partner with schools as well. Well, schools that are serious about this, they line up internships and job shadows for their students, and you don't have that resource. However, you can incorporate, and Dave, it was the same thing. We have a homeschool co-op that all of their students or they have the opportunity to take our course. You can build it into your curriculum. So I think there's more pluses and minuses for homeschoolers.
agreed.
But I would say it's all about balance too.
Mhm.
That's fantastic. I'll point out for homeschoolers on the academic side that some of what I discussed about pursuing your interests applies heavily to homeschoolers. A lot of the homeschool students I've worked with, they are advanced in many areas that they're interested in, and they really get to chase their bliss.
Yeah.
Um, however, understood that homeschoolers have higher standards for testing. Not only if they're applying to test optional schools, that might not be as optional for them, but also when they're applying to certain schools. I'm working with one homeschool student who started very early, like in ninth grade, because he wants to go to UT. And UT said homeschool students need to submit 1580 SAT scores. So
Oh,
that's like,
okay.
find out early what's required of you if you are not in a classical school environment.
Another plug for starting early and creating the space to be intentional.
It's
Yep.
always, and there's just so much like just if you're listening to this, then you're already in the information acquisition process. And that's the piece, right? Learn
Yep.
and then implement. Everything we're talking about, if you implement that, this will streamline your path. It will make it easier to get where you want to go, or really maybe where you should be going. All right. I think we have time for one more question. Uh, what about, we were focusing on majors having to do with kind of career-based or academic interests, but there are students that are motivated by other aspects of their lives. How would students that, are travelers or interested in different cultures or, just have exceptional backgrounds, is there a path for them to pursue scholarships like some of the ones that we've been talking about or some more relevant to their fit?
Sure. Well, I still think that for that personal narrative, you having that major and career clarity really still does give the student a leg up. But certainly, talking about these other things that the student is interested in, and I brought up the example of a kid who might like movies, and finding a scholarship to review a movie. There is a scholarship, and I wish I could think of the name of it, but it is about like, where would you like to travel? That's the essay topic. So yeah, there are definitely some scholarships available for these extra interests that may not be college major and career focused. And like we said earlier, if a scholarship has multiple essays, again, always deferring to the prompt, talking about some of these extras is fantastic. I'm thinking about a student I worked with a couple years ago. He was actually going into music performance, but he also had a little side business teaching kids and actually adults as well, how to solve Rubik's cubes. Like it was a very niche thing, and that that little business he had and the awards he won for being a world class Rubik's cube solver, um, weaved its way into many essays, and it really made him stand out.
I love that. How about scholarship opportunities for students pursuing trades like automotive or culinary?
There are tons. Home Depot has one that comes to mind right away. The micro something
Oh,
works scholarship.
his yeah, his is fantastic.
Yeah, yep.
I think
Um,
for even for the trades, you got to look beyond just the scholarships. The scholarships are out there.
yeah.
I mean, for that, but you also need to look, and because we say begin with the end in mind. If someone discovers through the process of beginning with the end in mind that they want to go into a trade, there are apprenticeships where you're earning while you're learning. There are industry like the hospitality. I'm going to get the name wrong, but the hospitality association of the universe. I'm making that name up, but whatever it is, they have scholarships. They do paid training. So there are ways to earn while you learn, and those are often overlooked as well.
I love it. We are pretty much at the end of our time together. Lisa, Dave, can you share any final points?
Well, I do notice in the chat there are a lot of people asking about specific major scholarships for specific majors. One of the things we'll send out will be a link to a free download that I have of the scholarship search sites that I recommend. It's not just the link to the sites, but it also gives a little information about what I like about that particular site. So it's basically how and where to find scholarships.
I'm also putting in a link to a resource I have. It's a free resource for everybody. This was the data that we gathered, and you can get the same information for any university on how do they admit, what role does major play in admissions. This is really crucial information for you to understand before you just start applying to colleges. Dave and I are pleased to announce that we're doing a buy one, get one free for our two courses.
Fantastic. And
Yes,
yes,
Jennifer.
for those who are asking, we will be sending these resources and links out by email.
Yep.
Lisa Marker-Robbins, Dave Peterson, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who attended this evening. It was wonderful to have you with us to talk about scholarships and career clarity.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Bye.
Thank you.